So for today's chapter reading, I just want to put out a disclaimer. This is probably one of the darkest chapters in the book, based on a real experience that happened to my dad when he was a youth. The details of this event are written just as described to me by my dad. It was hard for me to write this chapter because this is a topic I am not comfortable with. This is something I've never had any interest in learning about. It's not something that I'm familiar with, so it was a challenge for sure. And as you know, this book is based on experiences that happened to my dad. But it's an experience that as the characters go through, it helps them understand the real battle between darkness and light. With that in mind, let's read chapter 5, A Night to Remember. Let's meet up tonight. I want to hear all about this mystery man, and I want to hear about Florida. How about I come to your place for once? Okay, see you about 7:30. See you then. Celeste hung up the phone, anxious for the opportunity to finally be able to tell someone about Ezra. It was killing her to keep him a secret. Though she mentioned him a little bit to Dr. Kramer at yesterday's appointment, she was saving the best for Gia. After all, a girl's perspective was much more valuable for this topic, and Dr. Kramer would not give her the kind of reaction that Gia would. Honey, what are your plans today? Mrs. Day came around the side of the house where Celeste was sitting, curled up on the porch swing. Why? I know Fridays are my day to go visit Grandma, but the spa called and asked to reschedule my Saturday facial for today. Can you go for me and I'll take your turn tomorrow? I don't understand why we finally don't just hire full-time home care for her. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love visiting Grandma, but don't you think it's about time she gets a little more help? Mrs. Day sat down on the wooden swing next to Celeste in her white slacks, baby blue button-up blouse, and tan sandals. She gave a little push from her feet and the swing took motion. Celeste could feel a talk coming on and wished she'd just said yes to her mom and left it at that. You know, Grandma is a good woman and has sacrificed a lot for this family. Sure, we could hire someone to check in on her throughout the day, and we could even put her in a home. But don't you think as a family we have an obligation to be there for her? Well, why can't we move her into a retirement home where she can have constant care, make some friends, and we can still visit her all the time? You take away her home, you take away her dignity. If you take away her dignity, what's she got left to live for? I just don't want something to happen to her when no one is around. I mean, she lives alone and I worry about her. Remember, she has Uncle Joe, Aunt Patty, and all of their children who check in too. We all take our turn. Just then, Mrs. Day's face went from pleasantly calm to an eye-widening expression of suspicion and concern. Wait a minute. Are you having one of those, premonition moments? What? Are you trying to warn me about something? Celeste, we talked about this. I know your father forbids it, but if you know something, I want to know about it. Mom, stop. I don't know something. I was just having a conversation with you. Can't I express my thoughts without you always jumping to the conclusion that I've seen the future? All right. I can see where this is going. I'll let it be. Just promise me you won't keep anything from me, not like you did with Adam. Are you kidding? How many times have I told you what really happened? I was just as helpless as you were. Can't we let this go already? I don't need to be reminded of how you and Dad feel about me. How am I ever going to heal when you keep putting salt in the wound? Celeste, with tears in her eyes, Mrs. Day sat as she watched her daughter walk away. Celeste got in her car, slammed the door, and let out a heavy sigh. Thoughts of anger towards her parents were interrupted by a text coming through. I need to see you tonight. I have a surprise. What was Wes up to now? Something told her to proceed with caution. I'm going over to Gia's tonight. Can this wait? Tony has something that he wants to show us. We'll stop by Gia's tonight. The more the merrier. What? What was he talking about? Not Tony. This was supposed to be a night of confidential girl talk. Now Wes and his brainless friend were going to ruin everything. Maybe she could deter them. I'm not feeling up to a big group night, and Gia just got back from vacation. How about some other time? Trust me, you'll want to see this. Clearly there was no stopping him. This must be Tony's doing. Well, so much for an enjoyable night. Celeste set out for her grandma's house, which was on the east side of town. It was a beautiful sunny morning, and she was looking forward to taking her mind off of herself for a moment. Helping her grandma always seemed to calm her nerves and lift her spirits. She was in need of that right now. As she pulled up to the circle driveway, she smiled as that small, white, Victorian-style house seemed to greet her back with arms wide open. The tall, white aspen trees were nestled against the siding, green leaves shimmering in the sunlight, and the rose bushes still seemed to lovingly hug the small lattice wall near the garden. Of course, that little cherub statue next to the porch happily called her name. It had sat through many seasons, never ceasing to smile, rain or shine. If ever there were a little piece of heaven on earth, this was the place. Celeste always felt safe here, as though she were wrapped in a blanket of warm memories. Celeste knocked on the door and listened for her grandma's footsteps. Her grandma was a bright and cheerful woman who had sadly succumbed to the effects of old age. Not wanting to impose on her independence, Celeste had learned how to patiently wait, even if that meant waiting 3 to 4 minutes for her grandma to come to the door. The old wooden door creaked open. "How is my favorite granddaughter?" "I'm doing great, Grandma. How are you?" "Wonderful, now that you're here." Her grandmother looked so put together in her tan-colored slacks and pink knit blouse, her shoulder-length gray hair still styled with perfection, not a piece out of place. She was the much kinder, older, and wiser version of her mother. "Sorry if you were expecting my mom. She couldn't make it." "Actually, I quite prefer your company to your mother's, so no need to apologize. Come in." "Well, what can I help you with today, Grandma? Doesn't Mom usually clean your kitchen?" "Oh, don't worry about that old waste of space. Do you think these hands have done any cooking lately?" Her grandmother laughed as she sat down in her rose-colored velvet armchair. "Let me at least dust then. That's my job, and I'm good at it." "Well, if you insist." Celeste went to the hall closet and pulled out the gray feather duster. Her grandma wasn't fooling anyone. Everyone knew that she cleaned her own house, even against doctor's orders, but they pretended not to notice and went through the motion of cleaning just to feel that they were somehow helping. "So, how's your family?" "Well, my dad is busy like always, and my mom, well, she stays busy telling me how to manage my life." "Oh, I see. And how is that working out?" "Let's just say it's a good thing I'm here right now." "I'm glad you're here. You know, your mother is a good person. Really, she is. I know, because I raised her. I don't think she's a bad person. It's just that I'm going to be 22 years old next week, and I'm still on her leash." "Celeste, she'll always be your mother, and right now, you're her only child, her only focus. You see, when you become a mother, worrying about your children becomes your life's purpose. You can pretend to have your heart set on other things, but deep down, your children are your whole world." Celeste put the feather duster down and looked at her grandma. Here sat the only person in the world who could take the other person's side and somehow get you to agree that they were right and you were in the wrong every time. "Grandma, I don't know how you do it, but I think I get what you're saying. I know I need to cut my parents a break. It's just that there's one thing that always seems to get in the way: your gift." Of course, her grandma was always one step ahead. She knew what you were going to say before you could ever say it. That's why she always had the right answers and they came off sounding so well, because she knew. When you call it that, it makes it seem like a good thing. Well, isn't it? If you can convince my parents, then I'll be a believer. I can tell you with certainty that I know it comes from a higher power. Whether or not your parents seem to think so or even understand, it's not your battle to fight. How are you so certain, Grandma? Because I have the same gift. Celeste looked up at her grandma, eyes staring in disbelief. Did she just hear what she thought she did? You see things before they happen? Honey, if you only knew how often. Why didn't you ever tell me? I thought I was completely alone in this. I didn't want to draw attention to myself, but that's why I've always tried so hard to help you embrace it. There is more good involved with it than you know. Well, please tell me, because at this point in my life, I see it as a burden holding me back. Sometimes the only way to find out what we are truly made of is by how we handle what life gives us. My dear, you've been given an enormous weight to bear, and it will either become your downfall or your triumph. It's all how you choose to use it. Why do I only see the bad stuff? And why am I never allowed enough time to prevent it from happening? Whoever said it was your responsibility to intervene? Why do you assume that God wants these events to be altered? Well, then help me understand, because all I know is that bad things happen to good people. An awful lot in my life. Why does God show me these things, yet not show me how to help? It's a curse, a punishment, not a gift. How could a kind, loving God torment his children the way that I have been tormented? If there was a God, he would hear my prayers and answer them. Adam would still be alive. Celeste's grandmother reached over and took her granddaughter's hand. I saw what you saw. That morning, Adam died. I knew, just like you did. I know that you hear his voice. I hear it too. Celeste felt a rush of blood through her body. She couldn't seem to believe what she was hearing. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you help me? Because I knew that I was not to interfere. It was a part of the plan. It was Adam's time. Was she right? Celeste had never thought of it that way before. But why Adam? Why so young? Celeste could feel the tears coming on. Why, Grandma? It doesn't make any sense to me. Why did Adam have to go? Why was I left behind with these feelings of guilt? Why do I see the things that I do? You have been blessed with the ability to see what God sees, to have a glimpse of the future before it ever happens. Do you know how precious and valuable that is? No, I don't. I'm sorry, but all I can feel is guilt, pain, and confusion about all of it. They say what you don't know can't hurt you, and I wish I didn't have to know. I wish I could be like everyone else. Celeste, you've never allowed yourself to get to the good part. You shut it off too quickly. You doubt too easily, and you try to deny what you've been blessed with. Sometimes we may never understand the challenges we've been given, and we are not required to do so. You see, we're only required to work on the trust part. Trust that everything that happens to us is for our own good. God knows what he's doing. Well, then what is he doing, and why me? My dear, if I gave you all the answers at your young age, it would stunt your growth. I had to earn this gray hair of mine all on my own. Every piece. Someday it will all make sense, and you will see the beauty and wisdom in it. Until then, you just need to trust that good will come from it. Trust and believe. If only she could have the wisdom of her grandma, life would be a bed of roses. She wanted to believe every word of it, but this was a challenge she would have to overcome all on her own. Her grandma couldn't tell her what to believe. That was something she would have to figure out for herself. Grandma, I can't promise you that I will believe and do everything you've told me, but I can promise you that I will try. Her grandma smiled. I know you will, honey. I know you will. Later on that day. Just a heads up, Wes and Tony are dropping by tonight. Something about a surprise? I don't mind surprises. Do you have any idea what it could be? No, but I have a feeling that he's trying to make up for Tuesday night. You still haven't told me that whole story. What happened? I just pulled up in your driveway, so... All right, I'll be down to let you in. The Bertelli's house was enormous, perched on a small hill surrounded by a patch of woods. It was the perfect place to escape when you needed a breather. Celeste was pretty sure that it had its own zip code. Mr. Bertelli was a well-known architect and had designed his contemporary Cape-style mansion to be the dream home that they would never outgrow. Being that Gia was an only child and the home had 13 bedrooms, the only way they would ever leave it would be to downsize. The The porch light turned on and Gia came to the door in her gray yoga pants and a white hoodie. Hurry, you're an hour late. I want all the details before they get here. Celeste followed her down the stairs into the media room where both girls plopped down on the black leather recliners. Diet Coke? Sure. Gia tossed the cold silver can onto Celeste's lap. So, spill the beans already. Okay, I told you how I was mad at Wes, right? First, let me tell you that you looked amazing. He's a fool to get on your bad side. So, what exactly did he do? Rolling her eyes and running her hands through her hair, Celeste let out a deep sigh. It's not so much what he did, it's what he said. Well, what did he say? Before I can tell you that part, there's something else I should tell you. Okay, I'm all ears. When we ran the 5K, remember how I lost my bracelet? Yes, you were a little off that morning, sort of in your own world. Something happened to me that I really can't explain. I've tried wrapping my head around it, but it blows my mind every time. It was my brother Adam. He came to me and helped me find my bracelet. I listened and I found it. You saw him? No, there was no one there, but I heard his voice. I swear it was him. One minute I'm talking out loud to him, and the next minute he's answering me. I'm either incredibly blessed or incredibly crazy. Gia leaned forward and put her hand on Celeste's knee. No, not crazy at all. You've had a special experience that not many people get to have. You know that, right? Yes, at least I thought I did. Until I told Wes about it. He pretty much told me I was delusional and it was some sort of demented way of coping with Adam's death. Okay, so he's cute, but an idiot. I'm sorry. He tells me he cares about me, yet he makes light of something so personal. I guess it makes sense since he doesn't really believe in an afterlife, but couldn't he show a little more respect and keep his opinions to himself? For sure. Total foul on his part. And it's good that you're calling the shots. Well, I'm pretty sure I made that clear when I stormed out of there. I ran to the bathroom and I cried it out. Why didn't you call me? I didn't want to ruin your mini vacation. Besides, I did the next best thing. I met a really cute stranger who took my mind off of it. Oh, the mystery guy. Does he have a name? Ezra. Definitely a cute guy name. Gia, I swear it was just like in a movie. I turned a corner, crashed into a server, and was covered from head to toe in cheese. Then out of nowhere, Ezra appeared like a knight on a horse and pulled me to safety. I mean, he really saved me. Not only did he make sure I got cleaned up okay, but he completely lifted my spirits. I forgot what I was so upset about. I felt like I had a new reason to smile. It was the strangest thing. Did you get his number? No, that's just it. He was gone before I could even think to ask. The mysterious ones are always the ones that get away. Did you get any clues as to how you can track him down? He has some secret government job or something, so he wasn't able to say much. All I know is that he's here for a while on business. He loves his job, and I can't stop thinking about him. Oh, you poor thing. Well, the good news is that he's here, which means there's a slim possibility that you might see him again. Very slim. I'd have to spend all day downtown patrolling the streets trying to spot him out. Well, if it's meant to be, you won't have to try at all. At least, that's how it works in the movies. Well, ding dong, the sound of the doorbell ended their conversation. You ready for this? Gia asked as she got up and made her way up the stairs. I wish I could have prevented it, Celeste sneered as she followed right behind. Gia peered through the peephole of the solid birch door. Yep, it's them. Brace yourself. Ladies, how are we doing on this fine evening? Tony stepped forward and let himself inside. Hi, Celeste. Hey, Gia. Applying a little more manners, Wes greeted the girls with a smile and a nod before following Tony inside. So, you ladies ready for a night you'll never forget? Celeste and Gia looked at each other in confusion and then both turned to Wes, hoping for some kind of explanation. I wish I could take some kind of credit, but this is 100% all Tony. It's his idea and doing, Wes responded, putting the spotlight back on Tony. Just what kind of doing are we talking about? Gia asked, cautiously, eyeing Tony up and down. Trust me, it's just a little harmless fun. We're going to need to go somewhere secluded where there won't be any distractions. Are your parents home? Does this involve anything illegal? Celeste asked as she crossed her arms and glared at Tony. Girls, just who do you think I am? Tony replied as he backed away while checking his surroundings. That's just it. We know who you are, Tony, which is why we have every reason under the sun to be justified in our concern, Celeste rebutted. Wes, please explain to me what's going on here before we unknowingly jeopardize our health, safety, and clean records at the hands of your car salesman friend. Celeste turned to Wes, watching his face expression reflect a bit of embarrassment. Look, I know what you're probably thinking here, but in all fairness, can you just take us somewhere a little more private and I'll explain? I promise. My grandpa is storing his old trailer out back. Will that work? Gia asked. Perfect, Wes replied. All right, follow me. Gia led the group down the stairs and out the back door. Gia's backyard was secluded in itself. Surrounded by trees and windy pathways, it often reminded Celeste of a scene out of The Secret Garden. The setting sun was casting long shadows against the side of the house. Around the corner was a large construction area where a backhoe stood dormant next to a large pit. We're putting in a pool, so watch your step. Gia led them around the muddy hole over to a cement RV pad where a large fifth wheel rested. Ever since my grandpa upgraded to an RV, he's been storing this trailer here. My mom says if it's still here in 3 months, she's going to sell it. I'll buy it for $45,000, Tony remarked. I'm pretty sure you'd have to sell quite a few cars to afford it, Tony, Celeste sneered. As they stepped inside the camping trailer, a strange uneasiness came over Celeste. What was she getting herself into? Tony had something up his sleeve for sure. Everyone, sit in a circle on the floor, Tony directed as he sat down a black backpack on the carpet and began to unzip it. Now, Celeste, Wes tells me that the two of you had a little argument this week about the existence of an afterlife. Is that right? Celeste looked over at Wes as she could feel her blood beginning to boil. How could he? Wait, let me explain, Wes interrupted. It was real slow yesterday at the dealership, and Tony and I got talking about stuff. I brought up our conversation Tuesday night because it's been bothering me. Then Tony had this idea that could put an end to our argument for good. That's right. After 30 minutes with this baby, I think you'll both be at a loss for words. Tony pulled out a brown box and opened it up. A Ouija board? Celeste shouted. No, put that thing back in the box. Wes, I can't believe you. How could you tell Tony of all people, and how is this going to make things any better? Relax, Wes replied. We're not in junior high anymore. Look, let's just give it a try. If something happens, then I take back everything I said to you. And if nothing happens, then you're right, and I'm wrong. And we're right back in this stupid argument. Isn't that your thinking? You want to show me and everyone else just how naive I really am so that you can sleep better at night knowing that your actions and words are justified. Isn't that right? This is all about your ego, isn't it? No, calm down, Celeste. I'm trying to do a good thing here. A good thing? Just how is this supposed to be a good thing? I thought your apology Tuesday was good enough, but now I can see that it wasn't even genuine. Wait a minute, Gia interrupted. I'm totally on your side, Celeste, which is why I think this might not be such a bad idea. If the tables turn and the evidence is on our side, then Wes hasn't got a leg to stand on, which means he'll have to admit he was wrong and you'll be redeemed. Celeste looked down at the floor, contemplating Gia's suggestion. Let's make a bet, Tony said as he began to set up the board. If Wes is wrong, then he has to go to church with you every Sunday for the rest of the summer. If he's right, then you promise never to mention it again, and Gia agrees to go on a date with me. What? Gia asked. Don't look so shocked. I'm really not a bad guy. Gia and Celeste looked at each other, both waiting for a sign from the other on how to respond. You would really step inside of a church? Celeste asked as she looked over at Wes. Well, if I'm wrong, you heard the guy. But I'm not planning on being wrong. How can I be so sure you guys haven't rigged this? Celeste asked, looking directly at Tony. Man, what's it going to take to convince you all that I'm a decent person? Tony looked around the circle, hoping to get a little sympathy, but having no luck, shook his head. All right, let's just get this over with, Celeste replied as she felt the pit of her stomach do a somersault. If she didn't end this here and now, the way that Wes perceived her would forever haunt her. She wanted to finally earn the respect that she deserved from him. No, she wasn't crazy, and it was time to finally take a stand and prove it. Okay then, here's how this works. Everyone place your hands on the triangle, and we each take a turn asking a question out loud, and then wait to see what happens. Sound simple enough? I'll go first. They each put a hand onto the wooden planchette and waited as Tony began. Is there anyone here with us right now? Celeste looked down as she noticed Tony's hand trying to get cozy next to Gia's. What had she gotten herself into? This was so junior high. Clearly, this was Tony's perverse way of getting some attention from Gia. Either he planned to scare her right into his arms, or he planned for Wes to lose the bet. So again, he could guilt Gia right into his car. Either way, this was starting to look like a well-planned and executed strategy on his part. Do you feel that? Tony asked as the planchette began to move. Yeah, I feel you moving it, Wes replied. I swear I'm not doing a thing. Look, I'll take my hand off. Tony removed his hand as the planchette continued to move until it stopped on the word yes. Then it must be the two of you. I'm not convinced. Celeste and I will both take off our hands. Obviously, you'd be the only one in here with no intentions of moving it yourself. So, if it moves then, enough said, Gia firmly attested. Fine then, Wes replied. Who's asking next? You've got your hand on it, so you ask it a question, Celeste replied, hoping to be able to somehow avoid having to ask a question. All right, here goes. Did some unseen person really help Celeste find her bracelet at the 5K? Wes looked directly at Celeste as if to let her know that this would be the defining moment in their relationship. The anticipation was growing as they all waited and watched, eyes fixed on the board. Nothing happened. You see, I told you this was all a bunch of crap, Wes said confidently with a smile. Suddenly, the planchette began to move. Completely stunned, Wes couldn't seem to look away from his hands. Tony, what kind of sick joke is this? I swear I'm going to have your paycheck cut in half. Tony threw his hands up in the air. Don't look at me. I'm nowhere near the board. It's all you. The planchette slowly made its way in a circle right back to the word yes. Gia gasped. Celeste could feel the hair on her neck stand on end. There was a certain uneasiness in the room. It seemed to suddenly feel strangely cold for being in a tight, stuffy trailer on a warm summer's evening. Well, I think we know what question should be asked next, Gia quietly declared. I'll ask it. Who was it that guided Celeste to her bracelet? The room was so quiet now, as if they were all afraid to breathe. Celeste watched Wes's hands as her heart began to pound. The planchette began to move very slowly. The sound of it sliding against the wooden board sent an eerie chill down Celeste's spine. Then it stopped on the letter A. After a brief pause, it moved again, stopping on D. That's it, Wes shouted as he removed his hands and jumped to his feet. We are done. Had enough? Tony asked as he smiled at the girls. It was then Tony saw the sheer look of terror plastered on Gia's face, her eyes fixated on the board. It's still moving, she said, barely able to speak. Tony and Wes looked down at the board to witness the troubling movement taking place. The planchette continued to spell out the remaining letters one after the other, A and then M. Before anyone could utter another sound, it continued to slide around the board back and forth, up and down, picking up speed until no one could keep their eyes on it. No sooner than it spun into a whirlwind of circles did it finally slide right off the board across the room until it slammed into the wall. Completely stunned and unable to speak, the four of them sat frozen in fear, but it wasn't over yet. Just then, the shaking began. Violently, the trailer began to sway back and forth as cupboards flew open, sending pots and pans falling from above. Drawers slammed open and shut as utensils and measuring cups spilled out over the sides onto the floor. Windows rattled and jars of food hurled through the air, smashing against the walls. Near the oven, a magnetic strip containing a set of butcher knives caught Tony's eye as one by one, each knife began to fall off the strip and slide across the floor, causing him to make a mad dash for the door. Gia followed right behind as Wes grabbed Celeste's hand, pulling her along with him as they ran out the door and into the house. Gia locked the basement door behind her as they all sat silently on the couch, trying to catch their breath. What just happened? Gia asked as she wiped the sweat from her forehead. Isn't it obvious? We contacted the other side, and the other side answered back, Tony replied. There's got to be a logical explanation here, Wes added as he struggled to gain control of his reaction. We all saw what happened. What more do you need to know? Celeste responded while trying to fight back the tears that were about to explode. Her whole body seemed to shake uncontrollably, sprouting goosebumps up and down her arms. I've never seen anything like that in my entire life, Gia said. I mean, we could have been killed. Something warm began to run down the back of Celeste's neck. She reached back her hand to wipe it away and noticed the red streaks on her finger. You're bleeding, Gia gasped. In a state of shock, Celeste's emotions began to burst as Gia rushed over to inspect her wound. It's just a small cut, but you're quite the bleeder. Let me grab a towel. It's okay, Celeste, Wes said as he scooted over trying to comfort her. No, it's not, Celeste replied. You and your stupid ideas. You couldn't let it go. You had to be right. Now look at what's happened. We could have been killed. Hey, don't get mad at him. I take full responsibility for this. It was my idea. Tony stood up and cautiously peered out the blinds. Gia came back with a towel and some water. Look, it's not going to do any good playing the blame game. What's happened has happened, and we just need to be thankful this story didn't end differently, Gia said as she began to carefully dab at Celeste's wound. No, I'm not buying it. Wes stood up and walked over to Tony with his finger pointed right in his face. You're right, Tony. This was all your idea. So who was it that you bribed to come scare the wind out of us, huh? They're probably still out there laughing their faces off. Wes opened the door and took off running back towards the crime scene. What is he, insane? Tony replied as he slowly followed. I swear, if you guys are behind this, I'm never speaking to either of you again, Gia shouted as she carefully made her way out the back door. Where are you? Wes shouted towards the trees. Come on out, the gig is up. An eerie silence swelled within their ears. The tall tree sat still, as if concealing evidence of the horror that had taken place just minutes ago. Celeste looked down and noticed the sawdust, dirt, and fine debris scattered all around the trailer house from the construction. Surely if someone had been shaking the trailer, their footprints would be visible, and they would point towards the direction they may have come from. Look for footprints, she yelled to Gia, deciding she wasn't going to take another step closer. As the three of them slowly circled the trailer, they quickly noticed that the only footprints in the dust were the ones leading to and from the trailer door. Their own. I'm out of here, Tony yelled as he ran back towards the house. What about your board? Gia yelled. You can keep it. I'm not going back in there to get it. Unbelievable, she replied under her breath. Are your parents around? Wes asked. Yes, and I'm surprised they haven't responded to all of our screaming and shouting. They're going to kill me when they see what happened in there. Well, did it occur to you guys that maybe we experienced an earthquake? If they felt it too, then they'll have nothing to be mad about. That wasn't an earthquake, Celeste said. Before we make that assumption, let's be sure, Wes replied. Gia pulled out her phone and dialed Mrs. Bertelli. Hey, Mom, did you and Dad feel any shaking just now? Oh, okay. No, it's just that Celeste and I thought we felt an earthquake or something. It was probably nothing. Okay, thanks. She hung up the phone. The three of them looked at each other completely speechless as they struggled to comprehend coming to terms with what they had just witnessed. There was no denying it, no making excuses or conjuring up any logical explanations. Something paranormal had clearly happened, and something told Celeste that this was just the beginning. And that's the end of Chapter 5. I'll see you next week for Chapter 6.